Okay, I'm gonna call the Los Osos Groundwater Basin Management Committee meeting to order. I'd like to thank our guests online for being patient. We had to quickly switch over from Zoom to Teams, and it looks like we have everything up and running, so we can proceed with the meeting. So we're gonna go ahead and start with a roll call.
Director Reinecke.
Here.
Director Cesena.
Here.
Director Gibson.
Here.
Chair Zimmer.
Here. Okay, next, item 3, Pledge Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 4, board member comments. Are there any comments from the board members?
It's good to see everyone.
Yes, it is. It's been a little while. Seeing there's no comments, we'll move to item 5, special presentation. There are no special presentations. Item 6, the consent agenda. We have 2 items on consent. It's the 2025 financial reports and approval of minutes from our January 15, 2025 BMC meeting.
Yeah, nothing specific to call out here. I think we have an action item later in the agenda with respect to the closeout of the calendar year 2024 budget. So yeah, unless there's any questions, I don't have any further statements with respect to the consent agenda.
Okay, we'll open it to public comment.
If you have public comment and you're in the boardroom, please come to the podium. We will take public comment in the boardroom first, and then we'll go to online.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Sarby. I live on 4th Street in Los Osos. I have some serious concerns about the illegal effluent that's being dumped in our back bay affecting our water quality. I sent you some pictures this morning. On June 27th of last year, I emailed Supervisor Gibson's office to bring to light the toilet paper deposition problem around the back bay. I included the pictures of toilet
So,
paper.
excuse me, this is for the consent agenda? To make a comment on the consent agenda. You can bring that up during.
No, this is not about the consent agenda.
What's that?
This is not about the consent.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what you're looking for.
That's a, yeah, there'll be an opportunity
I'll wait, thanks.
under the public comment a little further down on that.
Thank you.
All right.
If you have a public comment and you're online, please unmute yourself. Looks like there is no comment online. We will go back to the board.
I'll move approval of consent.
Good.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 7, public comments for items not appearing on the agenda.
If you have a public comment and you're in the boardroom, please come to the podium. We'll take public comment in the boardroom first, and then we'll move to online.
Thank you. My name is Robert Sarby. I live on 4th Street in Los Osos. And as I stated previously, I have concerns about illegal effluent being dumped in our back bay affecting our water quality. On June 27th of last year, I emailed Supervisor Gibson's office to bring to light the toilet paper deposition problem around the back bay and accompanying effluent. I included the pictures of the toilet paper deposition that I sent to your office yesterday. It's in your package. Mr. Fixler, Supervisor Gibson's aide, told me I was mistaken, that I was seeing dried eelgrass, not toilet paper. I sent Mr. Fixler some more pictures of toilet paper lining the bay. Again, he responded that what I was seeing was decaying vegetation, not toilet paper. Frustrated, I contacted Tamara Anderson, a senior water resource control engineer specialist for the Central Coast Water Board. She investigated and reported back to me that she could not find the source of the effluent and informed me that she was referring the problem to San Luis Obispo County Environmental Health Department and the California Department of Fish and Game on October 21st, 2024. Well, I've heard nothing from either one of these agencies. I brought with me a sample of the toilet paper I encountered in the bay just to show you that this is not eelgrass. In fact, I do know what toilet paper looks like. I've encountered by the bay just to show you this is not eelgrass. It's right here. It's probably an environmental hazard. I intend to give it to Supervisor Gibson so he can give it to his aide. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Sorry, that one you got. Kicked you out this morning. Hi, Lynette Brooks. Is that on? Is it working? I have some suggestions to improve the annual report. I know the report might be mostly prepared, but you did cancel the last 2 meetings, so. First, and most importantly, incorporate all of the statements about intrusion continuing to occur in a new section at the front of the report titled Saltwater Intrusion, or Seawater Intrusion, or Worsening Intrusion, or something like that. Quit hiding behind the basin yield metric and admit that saltwater intrusion is continuing. Water level data should be presented like chloride data, with tables showing all of the measurements. Right now, if the public wants to know what historic water levels are, they must dig the information out of every annual report. 3, present change maps, showing contours of water level changes, preferably for different time periods, such as 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, if you have 10 years of data. These present a much better description of changes than do contour maps of water levels every year, which are almost impossible to compare. 4, contours on water level maps or change maps should not be extrapolated where data are not available. Just because reading will give you a number does not mean it is real. This is most apparent on figures 10 and 11 of last year's report along the north part of South Bay Boulevard and across the Morro Bay Estuary. Also on figures 11 and 14 with contours across the Morro Bay Estuary. You have no idea what water levels are under the estuary. 5, present all water level data using the same datum. In past reports, the 2 datums, NGVD 29 and NAVD 88, are used for different figures and different tables. They have a difference of 2.8 feet, so this is not a minor thing. If you're looking at a figure, you don't know if you're talking about comparing it to 2.8 feet or to 0 feet. Redraw the chloride contour lines on figure 18. I don't know what the numbers are this year. In previous years, the 250 milligram line between LA10 and LA11 should be very close to LA10. 250 is not halfway between 235 and 600, which is how it is drawn in last year's report. Make it clear that the current model is assuming only 1/2 of the amount of water being delivered to Broderson Leachfield is recharging the groundwater system. Please explain what is happening to the other half of the water. Add explanation that the Broderson Leachfield is currently recharging only 224 acre-feet a year in the model, and that septic tanks used to recharge about 1,300 acre-feet a year. The Broderson Leachfield did not increase recharge as is implied. Add explanation that the original USGS model that indicated recharge at the Broderson site could minimize saltwater intrusion simulated 2,380 acre-feet of recharge, almost 10 times the amount now being simulated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
afternoon, Patrick McGibney. First, my comments are directed to you as an agency, not as individuals, for the most part. Two of you weren't even involved for the most part, but you are now. If there is a snark tone detected, I apologize. Some would think it was humorous if it weren't so serious. When chloride levels reach 250 milligrams per liter, it indicates the basin plan isn't working or it's not being implemented properly. We're now at an estimated 249, too close to the 250. Red flags should be going up. Since we have had an adjudicated basin, the court required you to write a basin management plan, which was approved and adopted, and it requires you to follow the plan and abide by the stipulated judgment. Here are some of the quotes you wrote in the plan. On page 78, you write, quote, "Controlling seawater intrusion is a prerequisite for any long-term basin management that provides a sustainable groundwater resource," end quote. On page 84, it is bulleted that supplemental water supply would be required for build-out. On page 93, you write, quote, "The basin faces two significant threats that require immediate action: nitrate impacts on the upper aquifer and seawater intrusion into the lower aquifer," end of quote. The primary goal of the basin plan, as you write on page 108, is to stop seawater intrusion, but you allowed seawater to advance, which it has. You also wrote on page 137, quote, "Accurate data regarding groundwater production is necessary to implement the basin plan," end of quote. But after 10 plus years of management, close to 50% of the production is still unmetered and only estimated. You also say on page 149, it is your intent to implement a, quote, "state-of-the-art," end of quote, water use efficiency program. What happened to that? On page 221, you write about a conservation plan that was required by the county wastewater project that would require enforceable mechanisms to achieve its identified goals. The BMC has never established a conservative program or a conservation program with enforceable mechanisms. That goes back to your writing on page 137, where you talk about the need for accurate production well data. If you were to implement a conservation plan with enforceable mechanisms, the only water users that would face enforcement are those of the purveyors. You can't force private and ag users to cut back unless you know how much they're using in the first place. In closing, you write the basin plan is equitable. It is not. Only a portion of the community is paying for it. Supervisor Gibson wants ag wells to be metered in Pastoral. Why not here? During my director's report comments, I ask you to please bring up the graph on page 43 of Dan's report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, there's no further, oh, sorry. Didn't see you there. One more comment in the boardroom.
There's a blind spot there. Becky McFarland, I'm glad to be here today. I'm glad there's actually a meeting this month. I think these meetings should be held every single month. Whether what I've been told is like, there's nothing to talk about. Looking at these metrics, I mean, there's always something to talk about our basin, because our basin is not sustainable. And you know, the yield metric that's being used, the state water board, who I can't remember who it is now, said that that should not be yield. It should not be used to show a sustainable basin. So I'm just looking at this chart just a couple minutes ago. It's like, wow, we went down in our water level metric, which should be going up, 249 milligrams per liter for our chloride metric. That's horrible. We're supposed to be going down. 10 milligrams or less of nitrates. It went up again. It's 15.7. Just those three things there should say, it's so obvious, and that's why people get so angry and you get so tired of us saying it, because it's here in all the reports. It's not sustainable. And we can pretend and go, la, 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 we're gonna build up Los Osos, it's gonna be great. We're gonna put all the low income housing here, which would be fine if we had the water. We don't have it. It's not good, and let's just tell the truth. Thank you.
There's no further public comment in the boardroom. If you are online and you'd like to make a public comment, please unmute yourself. Right, we do have a few written comments. Robert Sarby and Lynette Brooks both submitted written comments, which are, yes, along with their presented comments, they submitted written ones, which are posted on our website if you'd like to look at those. Additionally, Ron Crawford submitted a written comment that is also posted on our website. It's very long. It'll go over the limit for public comments, so we're not going to read it today, but it's available. And then we will go back to the board for discussion.
Jamie, there is a public comment in the chat.
Okay. Ronnie Gurin commented, when was the last aquifer update made? And if so, what have these updates revealed? Were the rainfall in the last 3 years yielded any increase in the aquifer water levels? And I think that is all for public comment. We can take it back to the board.
Thank you, Jamie. I'll bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'll just indicate to Mr. Sarby that my office will contact Environmental Health and see if they have anything to add to the materials already presented. I would note that the analysis of his previous notice of concern in the Back Bay was handled by the Morro Bay Estuary Program, which was confident that this was dry vegetation. So we'll check it out, and my office will be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd just like to make a comment about the meetings, and do appreciate those comments. I know, we have not had 2 meetings in the past, but ultimately there is work being done. I don't want to imply that nothing is happening while these meetings, during the time that these meetings aren't taking place. There's a lot that's happening, and I think the goal was really to bring substance and information to these meetings at that time. So a lot of reviews and dealings. There's been historically a lot of projects have been completed. We've talked about that in the past. So I think, as an agency, we are doing what we intended to do. We need to stay diligent. I understand that there's projects that we still have to do, and hopefully we can get those done as timely as possible. I don't know if there's any other comments, but we're going to go ahead and close public comment at this time, and move to action item 8, the executive director's report.
Thank you, Chair Zimmer. Happy to walk through the executive director's report when I can find it again. Please bear with me, I'm a little off my game today without having access to my computer and all the things that I'm normally used to having. Here we go. So yeah, executive director's report will provide updates on a number of the things that Chair Zimmer referenced that are ongoing, even when we don't have meetings. We're making progress on numerous BMC initiatives, and the executive director's report is our way of providing those updates. Starting off with the water recycling funding program grant and the transient model, the update is you'll see in the director's report that the schedule was modified with approval by the State Water Resources Control Board to allow the consultant team additional time to incorporate area electromagnetic, or AEM, geophysical survey data. And the updated schedule is shown in the table below. Cleather's geologist, the consultant for that project, has incorporated those AEM data findings, has completed the calibration of the transient model, has met with the technical advisory committee and the peer review consultants on 3 occasions, to discuss model calibration and to start planning for the different recycled water and supplemental supply alternatives that what we call the engineering team of the larger team will be evaluating. So important to remember is that, I think we spend a lot of time talking about the transient model component of the water recycling funding program grant, but that's really just, one of two primary components. The transient model is obviously an improved tool set that'll help us better understand the basin, but it's also a tool set that allow us to analyze different recycled water and supplemental supply project alternatives to better understand what are the most preferred or cost-effective projects or opportunities to enhance or increase the sustainable yield for the basin. And so we're working on both of those components right now in order to meet the schedule outlined in the table below. Back specific to the transient model, the peer review consultant is currently reviewing the groundwater model files and will be reviewing the transient model construction and calibration TM here shortly. The plan is for Cleet Harris geologist to present the transient model construction and calibration TM and baseline scenario results at the June BMC meeting, and then for the whole project to be completed, including the report, which includes documentation of the transient model and the engineering analysis, completed and submitted by the October 25th deadline. Moving on with respect to the Central Coast Community-Based Water Quality Rose Foundation grant, the BMC has released an RFP, or request for proposal, for hydrogeologic services. 4 proposals were received and they're currently under review by BMC staff and party staff, and with the goal of bringing a recommendation back to the board at the May meeting. Exciting updates for the basin monitoring program. As the board and the public will know, we've been working on an initiative in 2024 to modify they were abandoned production wells to be dedicated monitoring wells for Zone E of the lower aquifer, and that work was completed over the past couple of months. And so we'll have 2 new dedicated representative monitoring locations in the basin to help us better track seawater intrusion. And data for those wells should be collected as part of the spring 2025 monitoring event. So I should have that for you in a couple of months. And that's it on the BMC side. We also have the land use planning process update here. County planning staff helps us share information about what's going on the planning or the land use side by providing the updates that you see here in the executive director's report. And that, we've got our updated recycled water numbers. And then finally, we have an update on the BMC infrastructure projects for the second program C well, or the Los Osos CSD Bay Oaks well. Basically, as I understand, all the construction has been completed, the well equipping, the transmission made, and we're just waiting on PG&E to come out and connect that well to the power system so that the initial testing can be done and the well can be commissioned and turned into the system. So that concludes my executive director's report.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions before we go to public comment from the board?
Dan, you said October is when we're going to wrap up the water recycling facilities plan. Is that, and that's going to talk about reuse, the Broderson issues. Some of these points that were the end of Lynette's suggestions for improvement. Is that one would see maybe some of those addressed, like how effective is Broderson, what's happening with the rest of the water? That's when we get that update?
Correct. Yeah, so the transient model will allow us to much better model many things occurring within the basin, but one specifically is the Broderson Mount. So we'll be able to input assumptions about current flow rates to the Broderson Mound, and then, see how that mound develops over time, given that it operates on quarterly time steps. And so, whereas right now it's a steady state model, and so we can't change those input assumptions over time.
Okay, and while I'm touching on the suggestions for that annual report improvement, number 5 seems like a simple thing. I mean, seems like we should have datum consistency throughout all of the tables and things that are presented. And I know this isn't the only time I've known that these 2 data sets seem to conflict or cause problems for people, sometimes trying to follow what's going on. Is there any way to make that consistent?
Yeah, that's a question I'll have to defer to Cleat-Harris geologists as they're doing the detailed technical work. But I know that the BMC went through an initiative several years ago to survey many of the monitoring locations, the monitoring wells that we use for collecting water level data, to get more consistent datums, well, primarily to get more accurate information on the reference elevations, but also just to improve consistency. So I would need to dig into why there's still potentially a datum inconsistency, but be a great comment. Obviously all these comments will provide them to Cleat-Harris geologists. Potentially, I don't know if they can get incorporated into the 2024 annual report, but which will be bringing a draft to the BMC next month. If not, then potentially subsequent reports. But
okay, I mean, that's an ongoing problem, not just here. I remember at Caltrans, that would always be something you'd have to be careful of. Which data set are we working with? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. If there's no more questions, we're going to go ahead and open it to public comment.
If you have a public comment and you're in the boardroom, please come to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand. We will take a comment in the boardroom first.
Could you put up page 43, please, of the director's report?
Yeah. What is page 43? Let's figure that out first.
Yeah, is that the annual monitoring issue? Okay, that's still on the executive.
Graph,
Yeah.
the water level already down to those 1,500 now. Very good, thank you.
The basin plan outlines the necessity for all production wells to be metered in order for the basin plan to be successful. But after 10 years of management, the basin plan hasn't produced a sustainable basin, regardless of what the county is telling us. DWR warns that in this director's report that the Los Osos water basin is in critical overdraft. We now have the highest chloride levels, high nitrate levels, no state-of-the-art water efficiency program, no supplemental water supply, seawater intrusion continues, and the water level metric has now dropped to 4.1 feet. And to exemplify all this, what better way than to quote page 325 in the basin plan, where it says, quote, "If the basin plan programs are implemented as directed, it is expected that the water level metric would reach its target of 8 feet by year 2022, end of quote. That was 3 years ago. Could we then assume the basin plan hasn't been implemented as described? Again, the basin plan says the primary goal is to stop seawater intrusion, but as the old adage says, words speak louder than actions speak louder than words. It appears this agency's actions have been not to stop seawater intrusion, but to capitalize on water production, while at the same time increasing the sustainable yield estimate and creating a BYM of under 80%, where you could then claim the basin was sustainable and permit more growth. I would think this could be done by moving the wells east. The seawater front hasn't reached that far yet, and any readings from the wells would show low, if any, chloride. You could claim that there were no undesirable results from pumping and that therefore the basin was sustainable. But as we all know, that's not stopping seawater intrusion. It's only giving you more time to pump basin before the front hits the eastern wells. But that could be 10 or 15 years, and by then we could have achieved build out in Los Osos with more homes like the one on Pasadena that is currently listed for over $5 million. Think of the property tax revenues the Cook County could bring in. We will have gentrified Los Osos because the rich will be the only ones being able to afford the desal plan then required for more water. Maybe that's why the county hasn't been pushing affordable housing. The Anastasi subdivision of 98 homes approved by the county only had a few considered affordable. In closing, since we can't discuss sustainability here, the Anastasi project and sustainability will be discussed tomorrow on the Dave Conkelton Show at 4 o'clock. Tune in if you can. It could be wild.
It's Robert Sarby. On table 18 of the agenda report, it shows that Upper Aquifer has lost 1,800 acre-feet less water than the 2023 measurements, which is a 10% drop in water levels in 1 year, which is significant without any new growth occurring. This demonstrates that the basin yield metric is probably not the item we should be looking at to determine whether this aquifer is safe. The chloride metric in 2023 basin management report states that the chloride metric was 199 milligrams per liter, and that value has risen to 249 milligrams per liter, which is a 20% increase over 2023. It's a serious increase which demonstrates that our programs for controlling chloride are failing. In 2023, the nitrate metric was 15.7, and now it's actually increased. 2023 was 14.2, and now it's 15.7, so it's actually increased by 10%. So we're having some serious issues, and we're not controlling making this aquifer viable, so I suggest we do something different. Thank you.
Becky McFarland. I did want to comment that the reason I'm asking for meetings is not because I don't think projects are being done. It's because our community needs these opportunities to come and speak with you or to you. They could also be used for more education of the community that's more user-friendly and terms explained to people, because if you come here for the first time, you wouldn't know what you're talking about. In the report that Dan was telling us about, it says something about the DWR AEM survey, which is the Airborne Electromagnetic Survey. And it says that the results were released in November 2024. I don't recall seeing those, maybe I missed it, but did we learn any more from that AEM project, which is amazing. It was interesting to learn about, but I'd like to hear what that is. Thank you.
There's no further public comment in the boardroom. I do not see any raised hands online, so there's no public comment online. We'll take it back to the board.
Okay, thank you. Bringing it back to the board, Dan, I don't know if you have any comments on any of the public comment.
Yeah, there are a number of comments. Sorry, there are a number of comments on the reports. I would again just preview that we'll get the 2024 annual report next month, an opportunity to review that in detail. We have some of the important components from that report in today's agenda, but without all the narrative backup that'll come. So that'll be available next month, and I think helps address a lot of the questions. I definitely enjoy reading the narrative that goes along with all the tables. There's a lot of good information in there that helps explain some of the things. Not always the most public friendly or, non-technical friendly, but, we try to make it as accessible as possible. The AM survey results, there's a question about that. That's actually an initiative for 2025. We have some money budgeted to do some interpretation of those AM survey results and maybe even collect some more geophysics survey data. So that's something we'll be looking to work on later this year.
All right, thank you. I just have one comment too on the executive director's report. When we talk about the growth management ordinance, the last sentence says there are no Title 19 retrofits to build certificates issued in March of 2025. Is that implying that there hasn't been any? Because I don't think there was any at the start either. I think there's some historical certificates out there, but there isn't anything new developing, right? Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. We talk about building and how much building is taking place, and there really isn't any today because of this certificate.
It might be a good idea though if we could get just a brief summary of the projects that have been proposed, applications that have been submitted, where any of that is at. I think LOCAC gets some of that information, but it might be good for us to have that too.
And so is that the list? I mean, there is a project list, right? I mean,
well, there is, and I just talked to planning, and I think in the coming months as we get into the year, into the annual report, as we tee up to decide what we're going to do for next year, we can get that material together. My understanding is there are 4 projects accepted for processing ahead of 2025, projects that were submitted before 2025 for growth management. So those would be outside the sewer service area. Again, all 4 of those are going to need retrofit credit in order to proceed. That's typically conditioned. It's not clear at this point which have them and which don't. There are not any submitted in 2025 that have been accepted for processing yet. So there are some people working on it, but we don't really formally consider a project until all the necessary information is in the hands of the planning and building department. And then at that point, we can ask them to tell you how many are in formal process.
I just know there's chatter in town, the builders are here and they've got a project here and a project there, but nobody knows exactly what stage that is. Is that somebody's dream for next year?
Okay, and so the Los Osos Community Advisory Council does get referrals on projects that are submitted. Typically, they will review those at their land use committee and formal council meetings ahead of the point where those projects are accepted for processing. So,
I heard something about training for LOCAC.
Yeah, and so the county-wide advisory council training is this month, in another week maybe, something like that. And that's just a sort of a 101 on land use regulation, how that proceeds, how the councils interact with it.
Okay.
Chance for them to
Not specific then to LOCAC necessarily, but all.
No, it's all for 12 advisory councils or something.
Thank
you. Yeah. And I know county planning staff is coordinating with staff on updating them with information right now. So, I mean, I don't know. I kind of liked where you were going with that a little bit. I've always advocated for some kind of update through this
just a brief
meeting, just to know where we're at. That might be helpful since we're so engaged in it, and the board members don't really participate in the staff meetings, so it would be.
No, so we can work with Mr. Heimel and my office to make sure that that desired information is part of the executive director's report going forward.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Okay, with that, we're going to close item 8, the executive director's report. We're going to move to item 9. We have 2 action items. Presentation on the preliminary 2024 annual monitoring report, 9A.
Yep, so as previewed, we have some of the preliminary, let's call it findings, lack of a better term, components of what the group can expect to see in the 2024 annual monitoring report. A lot of this information is not even necessarily new to the BMC. It's been presented at previous meetings, but some of the information is new, and so I'll just walk through it. One piece of new information that we haven't shared with BMC because, well, we didn't have it, was production estimates for 2024. So this first table here shows the purveyor production estimates. Production on the purveyor level. This is highly accurate data. It's metered data from the purveyor production wells, and is ranged around 1,000 acre feet over the last 10-ish years, and is consistently at that level as in 2024. And then we look at the total basin production estimates. Again, we have the purveyor data, makes up, again, about 1,000. Total estimated production in the basin right now is about 1,700 acre feet per year. So that remaining production comes from estimates of domestic or sort of rural residential. So that would be non-purveyor residences in the basin. And we have the community. This represents a couple of community facilities. I believe it's Sea Pines Golf Course, the community park and cemetery. And then we have our agriculture production estimate, which was 510 acre feet for 2024. I talked with Cleve Harris about that agriculture estimate number. I think we were all, well, we anticipated that the 2023 number was going to be lower than some of the historical estimates based on the historic rainfall that we received. I was a little surprised that 2024 was similarly low, but in talking with Cleve Harris and thinking back to how the rainfall came in 2024, it came late in the season, and actually I think we ended up with an average rainfall year. That timing helps provide water to meet crop evapotranspiration needs that doesn't need to get pumped out of the ground. So rainfall late in the season can be beneficial, more beneficial than a lot of rainfall early in the season when, frankly, the crops aren't really growing and don't need it. So that's the explanation for the ag estimate for 2024. That gives us a total production of 1,690 acre feet, which then plays into the basin yield metric. So the basin yield metric for 2024 was 71. That's calculated from a value of 1,690 divided by the current sustainable yield of 2,380. That's below the BMC's target of 80, which is a good thing. Slightly higher than we saw in 2023, but really in a similar range. And again, 2023 was a historically wet year, and so we saw reduced production across the board. The water level metric for 2024 is 4.1 feet above sea level. It represented a slight decrease from 2023. which was the recent high, again attributed to that historic rainfall year in 2023. The chloride metric was 249. That's an increase from 2023. You can see that in the graph that we showed earlier, and we'll show here in a little bit. A large part of that increase is attributed to the increased chlorides in the Rosina well that we talked about at the January meeting. And there were some differing operating conditions at the Rosina well in 2024 that may have contributed to that, i.e. they pumped more water out than typically has occurred in the past. And then the nitrate metric is 15.7. It's slightly higher than the 14.2 value from 2023, but largely in a similar range.
The narrative next month maybe addresses some of that, because I'd sure expect that nitrate level to be dropping. Yeah,
that is kind of the challenge with presenting the number without the narrative. I don't have the explanation for why that is. You're right. We have seen sort of a more, I believe, a kind of consistent downward trend on the nitrate metric, and we're seeing a slight uptick here in 2024. But we'll have the narrative, we'll have the individual well values next month, and that will help us better understand why that may have happened.
Refresh my memory, if you would, back to table 14, the estimated basin groundwater production. 2023 domestic production dropped in half, and from where it had been consistently, and I can't remember why that happened.
Yeah, good observation. I should have called that out. So as you can see, it was basically 220 for 10-ish years, and then it dropped in half. There was a updated study, the 2023 water offset study that the county completed, which was a detailed look at rural residential development, landscape irrigation, and the 110 estimate is the value that came out of that study. And so that study was reviewed by Cleateris, the methodology and the results were agreed with, and so then it was agreed that we would use that number in the annual report as a more accurate estimate of domestic or rural residential production.
And Dan, if you could remind me, which of the ag production values were reviewed with the Landsat data?
Yeah, great question as well. I had to look this up this morning also. So all of these ag values are still using the historical soil moisture budget methodology. It does not incorporate the Landsat OpenET. What Cleateris will be doing this year is bringing we did it last year. We did a comparison of the two different methodologies, but we didn't say let's adopt that new methodology for the annual report. So this year they'll be bringing a comparison of the two different methodologies.
Which were very close.
They were.
And in fact, the one that's quoted here was, as I recall, a slightly higher estimate than the Landsat confirmed.
Yeah, and the recommendation was to kind of move forward with kind of a hybrid approach that used the best parts of both methodologies. So we'll get to see those numbers. Yeah.
But we have high confidence in that as an estimate.
We do, yeah. I mean, the nice thing about what we're showing here is it's not attributed to a change in methodology. This is all done with a consistent methodology. It's just, frankly, it rained for the first time in a while in 2023. And then, the timing of the rain in 2024 was beneficial.
I have a question regarding the wells and the metering today. New wells require a meter, is that correct?
New wells in the coastal zone require a meter. In general, basin or county-wide, dealing with SGMA, the equivalent process outside our adjudicated area, I think it's become clear that the Landsat-based approach to measuring consumptive water use is cheaper, easier, less intrusive, and I don't know of any intent anywhere, including in our basin, to install meters. It requires a whole bunch more work, and obviously meets a certain amount of resistance from folks, but we've benchmarked the Landsat-based estimation of the amount of water that escapes the basin is works, and so that's certainly in the Paso Basin, where I spend a good bit of time. That's what we're doing.
And that modeling was ran in the 2023 offset, water offset study, is that right?
Not an offset study. We had a separate investigation that again looked at it. I can't remember exactly which years, but I think we applied it to a couple of 3 fairly recent years, and again came up with remarkably close to the same number. And the methodology we used was suggested a little higher than the Landsat-based, which is a direct observational system. So I think the hybrid system, I recall now, the hybrid system we worked, I think takes the best of both of those, and I hope we do adopt that going forward. And we should plan. But again, there's no major deviation in terms of our understanding of the basic dynamics. We've been, I think, solidly estimating ag use for quite some time.
Yeah. Well, I was focusing in on the domestic use too. So they if they're in the coastal commission, they require a meter?
New well does.
A new well does.
Yeah.
But what about a replacement well?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Don't know. I speculate there, but maintenance.
Sorry to keep asking so many
No,
questions.
no.
Do you know if any of them have meters on them?
I don't know. There's no, I guess the requirement for a new well, and I'd have to look at the details. It may have a reporting requirement, but there's no mechanism. We, the county, don't have a system going out and recording that overall, because again, meters on wells are an uneven distribution, and I would guess there are relatively few.
Yeah, and I think the only reason why I ask is just because that is cutting that in half. It's the modeling that's done, and if there's a way to confirm the modeling, that's always helpful, right? It takes that question off the table that this is the best data we have.
And that's what we did. That was part of the domestic use, was part of the water offset study. So they do go out and look at, I guess you might call them meta studies. I don't have that study right in front of me, but that was verified by the engineering firm that provided it. So we're pretty confident in that. We, again, take a similar approach elsewhere in the other basins. For instance, Paso, I think, uses similar assumptions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks for the presentation, Dan.
Sorry, just a couple more slides.
Oh,
just
I'm
to
sorry.
get there. So we have the recycled water deliveries, the annual value and the planned value, and then the annual values.
Is that saying that 540 is what we have available? The 780 was what we thought we would have to work with, so that if the Memorial Park came to us and said, we want that 50, we'd have to cut somewhere else? We wouldn't be able to satisfy everyone that wanted?
Yes. So, I mean, yeah.
Okay. We just don't have as much.
We don't have as much wastewater as was envisioned we would have when the basin plan was developed. And, I think we can attribute that to the conservation efforts of the community, which is great. But yeah.
It really shows.
Downside is
15, 16, when the retrofits kicked in after the sewer. You really see the value of that program.
There's one other observation that I make that shows that we had done something right, which I always like to celebrate. So if you look at the production, the purveyor production of 1,000 acre feet-ish, 1,022, and you go back up to the recycled water deliveries, The influent to the plant was 701 acre feet, 70% indoor water use. And that was the estimate that we made in developing the sewer, that it was 70% indoor, 30% outdoor. And, at the same time, to my purveyor friends here, I would say, well, that 30% perhaps offers some opportunity for further conservation, because we did the conservation on the indoor water use, not so much on the outdoor water use. But I like that it came out so close to 70%. That was a hopeful sign.
Actually, that was my question also, Supervisor Gibson. So the 700, the influent measurement, that is influent to?
It's influent to the plant.
To the plant.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is influent to the plant 700. The effluent that goes to various places outside is about 550. So we've got 455 goes to Broderson. You can see that's up on page, it's page 1 of 18 of item 9A or 38 of the consolidated package. I mean, there's an interesting question of what I can't off the top of my head figure where 150 acre feet of influent go, but it could go out in a variety of processes with this.
Well, that's kind of what I was wondering. I mean, we don't plan on storing that forever.
Right, and I'm just not sure.
There are ponds, right? Storage ponds.
They
probably evaporate and maybe
there's some
infiltrate.
evaporation. Again, I just have to ask our public works folks where the deal is. But sludge goes out, it carries a certain amount of water with it, that kind of thing.
So I'm wondering though, the consistency of the effluent. I'm wondering if that's just demand. Is the demand for the recycled water just consistent, and that's why we're delivering?
Well, and again, it's hard to know what is that 548, 19. I'll track that back with the Public Works as to what that number. I guess
So we could potentially have more available than we realize.
Hard to say. We'll find out.
Don't some of these sites also have more beneficial impact on the basin too? Yeah, so.
Broderson in particular.
In Bay Ridge Estates, there's also one, right?
Yeah, we aren't able to dispose of as much effluent there as we originally hoped for, because it was saturating the near surface and actually killing oak trees.
It was never intended as a recharge site, wasn't that sort of maintain the natural environment?
Yeah, and we found that the amount that we pumped in there was more than the site could handle, so we backed off. That's why we're only doing 14. It's actually shown down a little ways where the potential use, if you look at Bay Ridge, was planned to take 33, but we found it really could only do a little less than that.
I have also another question related to this, and it may be a little off topic, but has the BMC or anyone, even the county, ever considered a storage program for our recycled water for fire flow in any parts of the community, to have a tank that's recycled water that could supply fire flow in any event?
The short answer is not that I know of, because the fire flow is connected to the drinking water supply.
I guess I'm saying more of a dedicated system, like in certain maybe high-risk areas or something like that. I don't know if it would be something we could even entertain, or if it could be dual, irrigation purpose or something like that.
So all the storage that we considered are in the ponds there. I'm not sure exactly. So which are available for firefighting if necessary. Although another project we have is to cover them with solar to reduce the cost, so that sort of takes them off the table. But no separate study was done.
Okay. Dan, is that the?
We just cover more slides. Change in storage for 2024, estimating an increase in storage from spring of 2023 to spring of 2024 of 400 acre feet. mostly that 300 of that in the western portion, western and central upper portions of the aquifer. So that's a positive finding. And then we have our water level and chloride metric graphs that we showed earlier and that we presented at the January meeting. Reflect the increase in chlorides in fall of 2024 and then the slight decrease in water level in spring of 2024. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Appreciate the report. Any further questions before we go out to public comment?
Yes, I do have one clarifying question on that last table that you were talking about, Dan. So as I read it, the table 18, it looks like we dropped roughly, almost 200 or 2,000 acre feet between spring and fall in the western lower zone D, which I'm just wondering, is that what that is saying in that table?
Yes, that is saying, so the estimated of groundwater and storage in the spring was 127,500, and then in the fall, 123,900. And then, yeah, if you look to see where that change may have occurred, I think it's really spread out. I think you're seeing 300 in the perched in the western and central, 900 in the upper. You are seeing, 1,700 in the lower, no change in D&E, and then 700 in the alluvial D&E.
Would that be due to production?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to smile. Yeah, so that's associated with production. So typically, spring levels are the highest levels in the annual seasonal cycle, right? We get our rainfall, we get recharge, the creek is flowing, hopefully it recharges the basin. We see a peak of levels, groundwater storage levels in the spring, and then we draw upon that groundwater and storage throughout the year for municipal, agriculture, and other production uses.
Okay, so if it doesn't align with our production exactly, so if it's more than our production, what is the other? Is it just seeping out into the bay, probably?
Yeah, potentially. There's a certain amount of water that needs to be continually seeping out to bay to prevent seawater intrusion. So it's not a bathtub where it's there. You have this constant interface to freshwater, seawater interface. And the other thing is, the level of accuracy, with these storage methods are much lower than the level of accuracy we have for production estimates. We're trying to calculate the amount of fresh water and storage in the basin based off a couple of water levels in different aquifer zones, and then extrapolating that over a 2D plane. And so, yeah, you're not going to see, a perfect alignment between, production and these. But there are other external inflows and outflows to the basin as well that could contribute to it.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, and we'll go ahead and open it to public comment.
If you have public comment and you're online, please raise your hand. If you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium, and we will take public comment in the boardroom first.
Hi, Lynette Brooks. I wasn't planning on speaking on this, but after listening to all my friends and those OSOs talk about all the efforts they went through and all the money they spent saving money, I'm really tired of you guys crediting Title 19 with the conservation. It wasn't. It was the people who already lived here, spending money to retrofit their own houses, spending money to tear up their landscaping and put in a drip system. So when you guys are talking about this, please remember the citizens of Los Osos. who responded to the saltwater intrusion problem by doing everything they could, and quit crediting the retrofit program. Thank you.
Becky McFarland again. My thoughts exactly. While retrofitting has helped save water in our community, I'd give more credit to the community members. The number of yards that have removed grass and put in water-friendly landscaping is so obvious. I mean, the only grass I see is hidden in people's backyards. There's a few diehards that have front yard lawns. And a lot of that is attributed to the cost of the water. But people in this town care about their water supply, and people still have buckets catching water inside their house and taking it outside. We still do that in our house. I mean, it's been heroic, the amount of water that this town has saved. And then to the metric chart, I find the increases in chloride and nitrate very troubling. While slight in some cases, recent articles are predicting another drought. So it seems safe to assume, to me, that these levels are going to continue to rise. The chloride pollution shows that we have less fresh water and more salt water in our aquifer. And then what are the reasons for the nitrate pollution? What's the reason for that increase in that? I'd like to hear some explanation of that. And then there were questions that Chuck had on the growth management. I want to remind everyone that there is no limit to the number of guest houses that are going to be allowed and that are being allowed. They're not counted in the growth. They're basically, as I've said over and over, 2-bedroom, 1-bath homes with a kitchen in them. And no limit. So, and they're going to be given, will serve letters. So it's not even counted. So how can, it's just ridiculous. I just learned of another one of these structures that is supposed to be, a guest house that has just become full-time housing for someone. And as I've said before, it's very unfair to put that on neighbors, to think on their neighbors that they're putting someone in there full-time. So we don't have a good idea of how much water is being used in these. They're on the same water as the other houses. Anyway, it stinks, and we haven't heard yet about what's happening with ADUs. I thought that was supposed to come out in March, and maybe I missed that at a county meeting, but I'd like to hear that. Are we gonna have unlimited ADUs also? I mean, those are 2-bedroom homes too. Thank you.
Good evening. Could you put up table 14 again, please? And while you're doing that, as far as the retrofit to build program goes, this is the way I see the way it works. Let's say I have a toilet that flushes 2 gallons at a time, and I then put it in another toilet that flushes 1 gallon at a time, so my neighbor can now build a house that has a 1 gallon toilet flush. Well, I should have been required to put my toilet to 1 gallon in the first place, but even though I saved 1 gallon for my neighbor, that neighbor is still using 1 more gallon of water every time he flushes, which shouldn't be being used. So the retrofit and fit program, the build program, really doesn't even work. All right, on this table here, I know this is an interactive program that we're talking about here, so you can't really answer my questions, but I'm looking at 2019 as opposed to 2023. The domestic or the purveyor's use wasn't all that different. Domestic use, though, was half. Seemed like from 2019 to 2023. I don't understand how that could have worked. And the same amount, though, for domestic use went to 2024, when you're using quite a bit more water for the purveyors. And if you go over to agricultural use, on 2019, it was 630 acre feet that they estimated. And all of a sudden, in 2024, with a much higher use, it's only 510 acre feet. Well, there's a difference of 120 acre feet there, and I know it's important to keep the total down so we can keep the BYM under 80%, but even if you added the 100 to 120 on there, that would give you 1,810 acre feet, and I guess the BYM then would be close to about 76. But what if you go back up to domestic use, and instead of having 220 or 110, you have somewhere in between that? You also then raise the total up, and the BYM goes up again. So it seems like this is getting manipulated just to keep the BYM underneath 80%. So I'd sure like to hear an explanation on how that works.
There is no further public comment in the boardroom, and it looks like there's no public comment online either, so we will take it back to the board.
Thank you, Jamie. Dan, do you have any comments on further comments?
I guess just the questions about the differences between 2019 and 2023, I think, was, I think we spoke to a little bit. There was an updated study done for estimating the domestic use and in 2023 that was adopted by the BMC, so that represents that change in numbers. And then the ag number, ag in the Los Osos Valley, as I understand it, has been relatively built out since 2013 or, along. So we're not seeing, or I'm not aware, and I don't, our hydrogeologist has not really indicated that there's any change in the amount of acreage. And so the variation in agriculture production year over year really is associated with hydrology. Now, the only other variable in there that could be changing, I don't think we've seen a lot of variability, would be crop type. Certain crops do use more water than other crops, but we're accounting for that. We have crop type data that we use for the purposes of developing these estimates, so we would be capturing that. So any reduction that we're seeing is presumably associated with, well, hydrology, timing, and amount of rainfall that we got in that year, or potentially a conversion to a lower water usage crop type.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments from the board members?
I probably missed it. You may have said this already. What is the difference again between community and domestic?
Yeah, so domestic is what or sometimes I hear term rural residential. I mean, it's basically individual well, so it's non-purveyor residential. Yeah, so it's people living in or overlying the basin, but aren't receiving their water from a purveyor. They have their own individual well. So typically they're on the east side of town. I think there are some spread out throughout central, but yeah, east of South Bay. Yeah.
We estimate there are about 200 fairly large lot rural residential. And that I believe that the study showed that average use on such a property is about a half an acre foot a year. So that's where you get the 110.
Okay. And sorry, what was the community again?
Community is community facilities. So in Sea Pines, the community center / park, and the cemetery.
Got it. Thank you.
Less sea pines, because you can see here that they're using a fair amount of recycled water in recent years as well. And so I think it's schools, schools, park, cemetery. Yeah, schools, park, cemetery.
Well, and I think the schools get captured in the purveyor number.
Some of them, although we're now plumbing them to recycled on their their fields, so that's another source.
One thought I was having is that we see the change in the purveyor number every year. And if we applied that same percentage of change to the domestic private wells, it would account for those fluctuations that we see on the metered side. So, we're just doing a flat line, like this isn't going to change. The domestic wells aren't going to change with conditions, although it's a small percentage. It is trying to accommodate any variability that we have out there. So, you know.
Yeah, you could try to apply some sort of hydrologic factor, you know, based on accurate data, meter data that we have from the purveyors to some of, you know, that investment. Yeah, I mean, I think you can justify that.
I have a couple of comments. I am certainly aware of the efforts made by the citizens in this community to save water. That's been going on a long time. But that does not take away from the fact that as the sewer was built, there was an immediate drop in consumption from the purveyors. And you can't equate the retrofits required to hook up the sewer with the Title 19 retrofit to build ordinance. Two different things. One we all did. And I'm not sure that would have happened on that scale if it hadn't been required as part of the sewer.
Absolutely. That's where the drop came from, is the requirement to retrofit to connect.
Okay, the other thing I want to say is that, like a lot of you, I find the metric summaries, the draft metric summaries, very troubling because we're not making progress toward three of the metrics, which calls into question the one that we seem to be hitting the target for. And how solid is that basin yield metric if we're not meeting our other criteria? I'm awaiting the narrative. I'm anxious for the narrative. We need the narrative, we need the transient model, we need updated information.
Yeah, I think that was a key factor, was the model, right? We've been holding off. It's a real, I think we all understand how important it is to get that model, because that was going to be the kickoff to making some of these changes, including the conservation. I think we've talked about that in the past, how important that is, that there is additional conservation to be achieved, and along with many other things. But, you know, I agree that, you know, this community has really taken extraordinary efforts over the years. It's huge. You just don't see it anywhere else in any of the other communities, what this community has done and how passionate they are about their water. I think that, you know, we do look at these metrics. We do need to react to the metrics. And I think we have done that in the past. You know, we've made some changes and pivoted. We may need to do that again. We better prepare to do that based on the model output and these metrics that we're seeing. So I think, you know, none of us are denying that we have work to do and there's improvements to be made. They're going to take time to implement and to see the results and the benefit of that. I did want to make a comment on the retrofit program in 2015-16, right? So you got to remember we had you know, the governor's orders for mandatory conservation and drought and implementation. So that was just, you know, public meetings, and the amount of energy that was put on conservation at that time was astronomical, unprecedented. So that's another key factor to keep in mind during that time frame. Yeah. Okay, we've had public comments. Noah, do you have a comment?
No, just receiving thought.
Okay, thank you.
I do. I just wanted one more, I guess. I just agree with Chuck on the metrics. I also look forward to the annual report. I think one thing that kind of jumps out to me is, as I look through, I mean, the chloride number is definitely alarming, but even as you look through the raw data for the other observation wells, you know, it's also not good. You see the red numbers frequently at the end, which indicates an anomaly or an increase, and that's almost consistent across the board. So something is happening, and I just want to, I guess, say I'm in agreement with Chuck. I really look forward to figuring out what's going on here.
Yeah. And in addition, you know, we have the new monitoring points coming forward too. So with the model and the monitoring, I think the picture is going to become clear one way or the other for us. Okay, thank you. We're going to go ahead and close 9A and move on to 9B, approval of the 2024 annual operating budget, the closeout and proposed procedure modifications to BMC rules and regulations to incorporate the budget reserve target. So we've talked about this in the past, and we have some reserves, and now we're gonna talk about what to do with it.
Yeah, so if the board will recall, in 2024, we took big steps or incorporated some pretty significant changes on how the BMC manages funding, and we opened a bank account, and we got upfront contributions from the member agencies, and so we wanted to kind of close that out now that we've been through the first year of this new sort of funding structure, which one of the primary benefits, the drivers for moving towards it, was the ability to roll funding over year, which we didn't really have baked into the old system. And so what we've got for you today is kind of the closeout of the budget from 2024. We've got a recommendation for what the BMC could consider doing with the unspent funding for 2024. And then we also have, as directed by the BMC, we incorporated the concept of a budget reserve target into the rules and regulations document. And so we've got that for your review and approval as well. So I guess let's start with that. This is really nothing more than, what was proposed at the January meeting was to establish a budget reserve target at 10% of the annual operating budget, and some guide rails for how those funds could be used. And so they need, full approval by the BMC to spend those funds, and then also some procedural stuff. So at the end of each calendar year, or closeout of each calendar year, we would provide a recommendation of whether to preserve funding for the future year or not. So those are specific proposed edits to the rules and regulations document. Jump into the numbers. So we have the calendar year 2024 BMC budget. The BMC budgeted $353,840 for 2024. When we look at the budget master, we ended up only spending $277,000 of those dollars, which left a remainder of $76,000 unspent in the calendar year budget. And so we, and these are just those numbers in summary and easier to read. So we cut to the chase. We have $76,000 unspent. The 10% of the operating budget for 2025 would be approximately $35,000. However, we were recommending that the BMC retain the full $76,000 for the following reasons. One, in the calendar year 2025 budget, we only budgeted $5,000 for legal counsel, and it's likely that we're gonna need more budget for legal counsel in responding primarily to Public Records Act requests that we received in 2025. Also, we've got a significant infrastructure project, for the BMC and the installation of a new Sweet Springs monitoring well. And so depending on bid pricing, it may be beneficial to have more funding available in case bids exceed the budget from the Rose Foundation and what was included in the 2025 budget. And then similarly, we have a significant planning initiative in the transient model and the water recycling funding study that it may be prudent to have an additional reserves in case the BMC would like to expand the scope of either of those efforts. And so we are making the recommendation to retain the full amount, but are open to BMC direction on how to proceed.
Any questions for Dan? So just to clarify, Dan, the $70,000, that will require approval unanimous approval of the BMC to spend those funds? Or are you asking for that now and then it just goes into our budget?
So basically we're asking for the approval to retain those funds now. Otherwise, we'd have to write each of the agencies a check, which we can do. But so we can either write a check for $35,000, total, and then split it up and send it back to the agencies, or we can retain that full amount in the BMC's bank account. Now, we still can't authorize use of those funds over anything that hasn't been approved in the current budget. So those funds can't actually be spent without getting subsequent BMC authorization.
All right. Thank you.
Couple of questions, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Or they could be spent for the budgeted intent that they were, for the intent they were budgeted. Remind me, if you could, Mr. Heimel, when next meeting will be considered, we do a calendar year budget, right? So it won't be till the fall. So we've just we've closed out 24, we've rolled this, you're proposing to roll this into the 25 budget. And when we come to budget for 26 later this year, we can decide to use these retained funds if they're still there, and thus reduce contributions from individual members, or go crazy and just spend like what? Go like first class or premium coach.
Yeah, good point. So, this is the first time we've done this, and so we didn't really have the closeout numbers for 2024 when we were developing the 2025 budget. But next year, we still won't have all the closeout numbers, but we could consider putting the rollover budget towards the contributions for 2026. In essence, the agencies could make smaller contributions to 2026, and we could still keep the same level of service.
And does that need to be decided right now?
No.
But we are deciding whether to hang on to the funds.
Yes.
I don't see any reason to cut checks and send them back. We've got a lot of business and work still to do, and that's not a huge amount to keep in reserve. Reserves are good.
All right. Let's go ahead and go to public comment. Okay. There is no public comment in the boardroom.
There is no more spectators in the boardroom, so there's no public comment in the boardroom. But if you have one online, please raise your hand. Looks like there is no public comment online, and so we will take it back to the board.
I'll move approval of staff's recommendation. I think both the retention and the change in rules.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, that closes our action items. We'll now move into public comment on closed session item. In closed session, we plan to talk about the public employee performance evaluation pursuant to government code in detailing general counsel representation.
Okay, we have no public comment. He just asked for it. Oh. I was just obviously going with hearing.
If you have any public comment online, please raise your hand. It looks like there's no public comment online or in the boardroom.
Okay, we'll now adjourn for closed session.
Yeah. I was able to get the other teams meeting up, and it looks like they're still adjourned in closed session. And Jamie just emailed me back and just said that she asked Dan, and they at this point hadn't asked that staff or Craig be brought in yet, and so that's why we haven't been pulled in. So I said we'll stand by.
muted.
Okay.
No.
Okay, we are back from closed session with no reportable action. We'll close item 11 and the temporary adjournment of the closed session, item 12. And we call to order, item 13.
I think we covered that.
All right. Let's follow the agenda. Okay. Yeah, so our next meeting, our next meeting is going to be May 25th, right?
Third Wednesday.
Third Wednesday of May.
Yeah,
And
let me find the date. Looks like May 21st.
May 21st. All right, sounds good.
All right, thank you,
All
sir.
right, thank you. Meeting's adjourned.